Welcome to Mental Health Momentum, the Silicon Slopes podcast. I'm Dr. David Morgan. I'm a licensed psychologist and the director of mental health here at Silicon Slopes. And on this podcast, we talk with business leaders and mental health professionals to talk about mental health issues in the workplace and also what we can do to address those. And I will introduce my guest today, Jesse Gale. Jesse is the founder of Revive Executive Branding, which I learned about as I investigated you. This is awesome. I can't wait for you to talk about it. It's specializing in crafting standout executive resumes, LinkedIn profiles, and personal branding strategies for professionals across industries. He's also the host of Behind the Hire podcast, where he interviews industry leaders to uncover insights and strategies for career success. Beyond his professional endeavors, Jesse is a dedicated father and husband. So Jesse, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I want to hear about father and husband a little bit. We talked earlier about your wife. You have children as well, I assume?
Yeah, we have one little boy, 6 months old.
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. He's adorable. So he makes me happy every morning. So
it's
it's
such a great time.
Yeah.
I was talking with a previous guest who is right now, she's raising 4 teenagers. And we have 6 children, but our youngest is 21. So,
okay.
And so she's in the midst of all that. We were talking about how it was simpler when they were little. I'd like to tell you it gets easier, but it never does. I mean, it gets different. It gets different, and it gets easier in some ways, difficult in other ways. Parenting's just not for the faint of heart. But it's a great, great thing to do.
Yeah. I wouldn't do what I'm doing for anybody else. It's a good way to put it.
Totally.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Like he getting up in the middle of the night, waking up early, changing his diapers, not my thing, but I love doing it for him. So
I wish I could go back to that part of my life and actually realize how good I had it. Everyone's just taking care of you. You're the center of attention. I'm like, this is never going to happen again.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize what I had,
Yeah.
Like no one's ever going to do this. No one's ever going to feed me something. At the most, they'll make it for me. I still have to eat it myself, right? And your boy's just getting fed.
He loves it. My wife, just at lunch today, he was laying back with one arm back and he was getting fed. My wife's like, I wish I could do that.
Exactly.
Like that's the life, He's just getting chubby and loving life,
Right.
and we don't get to do that.
No, unfortunately. So, well, tell us a little bit about just your background and any interest in mental health that you might have. The podcast is obviously focused on mental health. So,
well, background is obviously in executive branding.
Yeah.
Right. I sold for a company that did it and just started our own. Background in mental health is I'm not a psychologist. I don't have a degree in it. I think everybody's affected by it, and everybody knows somebody that's affected by it. So It's a really popular topic right now. I talk to a lot of friends that go through it, family members, and I think it's something it's smart to have on your mind.
Yeah.
Because everybody you're speaking to, you don't realize what they're going through until they're out of it, is usually what I find, that they're willing to share about it, and you wish you could have helped them more. So I think it's good to know more about it, learn more about it, just so you can help the people you love.
I heard someone say once that anyone you talk to, he says, if you assume that they're going through something deeply troubling at the time, you'll be right about 80% of the time.
Yeah.
That most people, there's some sort of struggle, even like you're talking about with your 6-year-old baby boy. I mean, it's hard.
Yeah.
It presents difficulties that you did not have 7 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
All of that changed in an instant when he was born, and everyone is going through something. And I appreciate what you said as well, that mental health has become, for whatever reason, either it's happening more frequently, or we're more open to talking about it and admitting to it now.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that there's not a person out there that either hasn't struggled with something in mental health or doesn't have a personal first-degree relationship with someone who has, right?
Yeah.
So this isn't something like, I've kind of heard about that, but never really come across it. Everyone knows about it.
Yeah. I have not met somebody that doesn't know about it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
I was reading about your history on your website, and you went from a pre-med student to starting your own company. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me that history. That's sounds like an interesting journey.
Yeah. You can cut me off. I'll try to make it a short story. Pretty much my whole life, I grew up wanting to be a doctor. I wanted to be a surgeon. I wanted to go into, cardio surgery. I wanted to go that route. I did all the pre-med classes. I studied a ton, studied like crazy, and my dad was always my motivating drive, right? He always told me, my dad was in sales. He had started his own company before, and he said, just go to medical school. And then even if you don't want to be a doctor, use it as a way to get into medical sales or something like that. He just said it's going to set you up for life. And so I just trusted that, and I still do, don't get me wrong, but I was ready to take the MCAT. I took the MCAT, but in that process, I was getting married. And just a couple months after getting married and the month I was supposed to take the MCAT and apply to medical schools, I was in Oklahoma and I was with my wife. My brother-in-law was graduating, and lots of details here, so bear with me. But I got a phone call and I listened to my mom and sisters watch my dad die. He was completely healthy. We played volleyball 2 times a week. It was completely unexpected. I wouldn't have gone out of town.
How old was he?
He was 57.
Oh my heavens. Yeah.
So completely unexpected, and I learned a lot from him. I was in a sales job while I was trying to prepare to pay for medical school. I was just saving up a ton of money.
Was that for the executive branding company you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I was just saving every penny I could. My dad was in sales, so he was training me, whether he liked to admit it or not. Every day he was on phone calls with me, meeting me in person, telling me how to better do sales, relate to people. And at that moment when he passed away, my whole life changed. Nothing was the same. Everything that I knew kind of just got put into perspective. What's important to me? What do I want to do? I still took the MCAT. I did well. I didn't do great, pretty mediocre, honestly. And was trying to decide with my wife if I was going to apply, and nothing felt right at that point. Everything felt right up to that. We had our whole next 20 years mapped out. But when my dad died, it was kind of, is this what we want?
Yeah.
And so I started looking back on what did my dad give me, even though he said he wouldn't have done it the same way. And he was at every single basketball game. He was training me every morning, every night, and basketball didn't lead to anything for me, but that relationship did. And I learned a ton.
Right.
And so I kind of just looked at my wife and I just said, I want to create that for our kids. And so really the transition was, in order to start my own company, I had to quit my job.
Right.
I quit my job. 2 days later, my wife told me she was pregnant. That's why we have a little baby boy now. And everything hit. And that last,
this isn't the last year and a half then. This is all very recent.
Yeah, it was, about a year and a half ago, we started our company.
Right.
And so 2 years ago, my dad passed away. So it was it just all came in waves, just hitting. So mental health, that's been a big focus. My wife has been my rock these last few years. But that's kind of why we got into it, is it created an opportunity for me for what I thought I could be the best dad. And be there for my wife and my kids. So I wanted to do what my dad did. When I do sales, I feel super close to him. So, long-winded answer
that's awesome.
to explain that. You can ask more questions about that if you want, but, that's kind of what got me into it.
I love this idea of, journeys leading to kind of unanticipated destinations, right? And we learn through the journey. I mean, that's the most important part of any sort of destination, is what we learn in the process. It's not necessarily arriving at the journey. It's what we do in the 5 or 6 years it takes us to get there, or however long it takes us to get there. And in your case, like you said, playing basketball didn't lead to an NBA career, but in that process, you developed a strong relationship with your dad. You learned values of discipline and hard work and working with a team and all those sorts of things, right? All those things you have to learn to be effective, even mediocre, at a team sports event. And then same thing, here you are busting your hump as an undergrad, studying hard, working toward this, with the goal to go to medical school. You don't end up going to medical school, but all of those things that you developed in the meantime, all of those, that discipline and that hard work and the critical thinking and everything you have to do to get to the point of even qualifying to apply for medical school, none of that leaves. I mean, you retain all of that. And so we get so hung up on, I didn't reach my goal. I'm like, I don't think the goal is what's necessarily important. It's what you did to get there. And then you can look back and say, oh my gosh, look at what I've developed in the meantime. Maybe there's a different goal out there for me, or maybe there's never a goal. Maybe it's just all journey, and then we have little pit stops and then we get on the journey again. So I don't know.
No, it is interesting. And it's also the people you meet along the way.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how many people that were entrepreneurial mindseted or had that entrepreneur kind of, mentality.
Right.
And a lot of the people that I was studying pre-med with dropped out of that and started businesses. And so it's kind of created a whole network for me of people that are in similar spots or 2 steps ahead of me. And then I can kind of use that as a blueprint for what we want to do next. So I didn't expect that. I wouldn't have gone pre-med and done that thinking I'm going to get relationships for a business I'm going to start.
Right,
You know,
right.
but it worked out in the end. So.
And again, the value of the journey, you look back and I think it's just a good lesson for anyone who maybe finds themselves frustrated at not reaching a goal.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe take a step back and just look and see where you've come in the meantime and say, okay, what have I gained in my journey to this goal? And then you might realize maybe that's the reward in and of itself.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that story. That's such a great story. So tell us about Revive Executive Branding. Like, what is? I never heard of this before. I didn't know.
Yeah.
But as soon as I read about it, I'm like, wow, this is a valuable service.
Yeah. So our focus is like what you mentioned when introducing me. It's resumes, biographies, LinkedIn profiles. It's pretty much everything that you need in order to find that next position, or as you're in that position, for people to understand who you are, what you can do. Most of the time we work with VPs or higher, so VP, C-level executives, and they just don't have the time to do it.
Right.
To be completely honest, even we work with a lot of chief marketing officers who are great at promoting their companies. They're great at promoting their employees, but they can't do it
Not
for themselves. Right?
Yeah.
If they did it for themselves, it'd be 10 pages long.
Right.
They don't know. It's your blood, sweat, and tears into
Right.
it. You try to decide, well, I can't take that out. I can't take that out of the resume because that's so important, right?
And no one's going to read something 10 pages long.
Yeah, yeah. So, the last stat I read was it's 5 to 7 seconds that somebody will spend on your resume before they decide, I want to learn more or I'm done. So we just take care of all of that. It's kind of a white glove service. They come to us, we do all the drafts, all the updates, all the changes, and we just make it a really easy process as they're running companies.
I think that's a very valuable service. And I love that just in general, because I've always valued expertise. When it comes to things like I remember my first car after we were married, and I decided to save money. I was going to change my own brakes. And it took me like 12 hours, and I had to buy, because I'm not very handy mechanically, and I had to buy all these other tools that I didn't have, and ended up doing it wrong anyway, and had to take it to a mechanic who had to fix a part of it as well. Because I thought this is probably the wrong thing to be working on your brakes. That's pretty important for your car. I don't want to mess that up. And I remember sitting there at the end of that long day, covered in grease and tools scattered everywhere, and thinking, it probably would have been worth it to take it to someone that's just what they do, that's their expertise.
Yep.
And you and I were talking before the podcast just about getting very good at certain things. And that was something I learned in psychology as well. A supervisor told me, he says, you don't need to be great at everything. Just get good at a few things. And that's what I did throughout my career. I had a very specific specialty in forensic psychology. And there were about 3 of us in the whole state that did what I did. And so there was a short list of potential clients, but they didn't have to go very far to find us,
Yeah.
And people would come and say, well, can you do family counseling? Well, probably, because I took a course about that, but I'm not very good at it. So you should find someone who just does family counseling. But if you need this specific service, come talk to me.
Yeah.
So I love that. I think that executives would do well for that. Let's talk about social media for a minute, because obviously with LinkedIn, you have to be very aware of how that works.
Yeah.
There's controversy about social media regarding mental health, like whether it's good for mental health, bad for mental health. Obviously, more opinions on bad. I'm kind of mixed. Do you have any feelings on that, on whether it's good? Like your son, is he going to get Facebook when he's 13 or
oh man,
or whatever? Facebook probably won't be around, but whatever it is when he's 13, right?
My wife and I have those conversations. We try to decide, what are we going to do? And we realize we're just going to wait and decide once we know it's actually out there when he is at that age.
But it's good to have those conversations now and to make decisions beforehand. You don't want to wait till he's 15 and comes home and says everyone else is doing this, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's a love-hate relationship. I go through deleting everything. I never delete LinkedIn. I can't. That's
right.
It's
your
what
business,
I do.
Yeah.
But Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all that stuff. I go through, and my wife would be like, "Did you see that video I sent you?" And I'm like, "Well, last night I actually deleted everything again because I can't take it."
Yeah.
And I see a lot of good that comes from it. I see a lot of people that make livings, they make a lot of money influencing and helping people as well, right? I see a lot of people on LinkedIn where it's a great, tactic where you post about it, you become a thought leader, you lose your job. Well, you've got 20,000 followers and people that trust you. They know you've got, expertise in the industry, and then you get a job really fast, right? But then I also see the flip side of it. Honestly, it really just depends on your mindset, in my opinion. If you go into that with the mindset of, man, my business isn't doing good, my job isn't great, and then you see 20 people that are making millions of dollars and they're so successful, that can be a dagger to the heart, right? I've been there, right?
Right.
And then you could also be, in a great mindset and saying, I'm gonna, show people what I can do, but also help people that are struggling at the same time. And if you go on LinkedIn, you just look at how many people are laid off. I mean, you could look at that for days,
Right.
and it's so sad, right? It's hard. People are struggling, and so it's a kind of a split, in my opinion, of when it's good and when it's bad. But if you don't have that right mindset, you could dig yourself a pretty big hole.
I think so too. And in a lot of ways, I think it's almost primarily neutral. I mean, obviously, their social media, their job is to keep you on social media because they make money the more you're on, and so I don't begrudge them that. That's what they do. We have control over how long we stay on, if we want to or not. Yeah. But yeah, like you said, that you could have one of two different approaches to it, right? You could have kind of that helpful approach where you say, I'm going to use this to get ideas and to learn from people's stories and things like that. Or you could use it in a comparison sense where you're just always comparing yourself against someone who's doing better. And that could be anyone. I mean, I don't know if Jeff Bezos is scrolling through Instagram, but surely there's probably someone on there that he's jealous of, right?
Yeah.
That he's thinking, oh, I wish I had that, one of the wealthiest people in the world. And he's thinking, but what am I lacking? And that's just, it doesn't go away with wealth. It doesn't go away with success. No. It's just something that we have to learn to manage on our own. And I think if you can, then I think social media is kind of something you can kind of tame and use for yourself. But for a lot of people, it does become problematic. No question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree.
So let's talk about then entrepreneurship and kind of the demands that creates on a person's own mental health and stress and stuff like that, right? Because so you go from pre-med where you're thinking, okay, I'll be a surgeon, which is, likely going to be a great income, mostly guaranteed. We're always going to have a need for that. Even robots. I remember my wife had surgery not long ago. The surgeon used a robot, but the robot's controlled by the surgeon. They don't, I don't know that they're just robots. Are there robots that just do surgery on and on?
It's probably close. I think they are getting close, but I don't think we're at that point.
And that scares me just a little bit.
Yeah.
C-3PO standing over you, doing your surgery.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you go from that to starting your own business, which is much less certain, in terms of what you're going to be able to do. So what, how have you managed your own mental health during that time? What do you manage the stress?
It's a really good question. It's really hard to say. It's honestly, my son helps a lot. It's going to sound cheesy, but waking up every morning and kind of just realizing what's, what matters at the end of the day, what my priorities are. And my wife is huge, for just being there all the time. And, she's always there with me. And honestly, I think a big thing is a lot of people just don't talk about things that are hard, but a lot of times I do think we talk too much at the same time, and a lot of talking, not a lot of doing. And so my wife is that great balance of, I'll talk to her like, well, this is all the bad things that are happening. And she's like, what are you going to do about it? What's going to change? What can we do to make this work? What can we do to get to that next level, reach those goals? And so my mindset is always going back and forth, but I think having somebody to talk to about it is helpful. Yeah. And then just setting goals that you can achieve, and then ones that are out of reach. And you're always doing something to improve every day. It's that, I was thinking about it just driving over here, that Navy SEAL talking about making your bed every morning. I don't know if you've seen that video. It's really just, hey, wake up every morning, make your bed. Because if you fail at everything else that day, at least you come home knowing you did something.
At least you had one win, right?
Yeah, you had one win. And so I'm not saying I'm great at making my bed. My wife would be right here telling me, oh, yeah, nice comparison.
Right.
But I think, doing something that you can accomplish and achieve every day is really helpful for me as a business owner, as a founder. Because if I can just hit a few things, it puts me in stride to do bigger things.
Okay.
And so that helps my mindset and mental health. But honestly, I'm a talker. So talking to my wife and talking to people that I trust really helps me get through the tough times, because there's a lot of them.
Right. Right. And sometimes it's just never ending. I mean, you have to, you have to pace yourself with that. I love both those ideas, the communication and then kind of setting yourself up for a win every day. Right. And you can control that. Yeah. We can control our communication. For some people, like you said, you're a talker, a natural communicator. Some people, they're not that way, but we can get like that. And every one of us can talk, we can say something, we can communicate in some way to someone.
Yeah.
it's tricky because it involves some vulnerability. A lot of times we don't want to admit that we're struggling, or that it's been a
Mm-hmm.
bad day or something. But man, it just gets better when you can just unload, and talk. I remember years ago, I was when I was still getting my doctorate, and one of the professors was telling us about a client that he had, and they had worked together for about 9 or 10 months, and she had resolved what she had come in for,
Mm-hmm.
and so she was there for her last session. And the professor, well, he was our professor, her psychologist, and he said, I'm just curious, what was it? Like, let's talk about what was helpful to you over these last 10 months. And she said, I
Mm-hmm.
know the exact time when I turned the corner.
Hmm.
And so he was excited. He's like, okay, do you remember? She's like, yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
He says, tell me. She said, and he was thinking it was going to be this great intervention he had done, or this new theory he had proposed, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
She says, I had just gone and got my hair cut, and I came in and sat down, and you said, oh, you got your hair cut. Looks nice. And that was it. And she said,
Interesting.
and for whatever reason, that caused her to feel seen. It caused her to feel important. And then that was where she turned the corner. And he was shocked, because he thought, what are you talking about? That has nothing to do with counseling, psychology, anything like that. But that's what made the difference for her, was just in that relationship,
Mm-hmm.
like having that connection with him. That was awesome. And I love that concept of, like you said, like making your bed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, they might think, well, that doesn't mean anything. That's nothing to me. So pick something that's valuable to you, but
Mm-hmm.
that you can do, right? Like every
Yeah.
day. Like if you said, I want to exercise at least 5 minutes every day, you can do that,
Yeah.
or I want to accomplish this goal for my business, make it a small goal, right? Something that's so easily attainable
Mm-hmm.
that you're confident you can do it, and then just get it done, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree too with that whole haircut thing. I think it's interesting to see when you treat people like people and not like
Yeah.
employees,
Yeah.
not like clients, you get more reward out of it. I mean, the whole reason we have a podcast for our company is I'm able to make these connections
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
our clients. We don't charge them for it, but I can say, hey, now I have this recruiter. Why don't you guys talk? Because
Right.
they have an opportunity for you. And I love it, because at the end of the day, then I'm communicating with clients and they're making jokes with me via text. They're sending me pictures of their grandkids or their kids. And that's what I like, because then that's rewarding for both of us, because we know somebody's out there that's not just trying to cash in,
Right.
or cash
Right.
out. They're not just trying to say, hey, do this, and then now you're going to pay me. They're saying, hey, well, how are you doing? What's going on? And
Right.
talking to an employee, I mean, my wife always tells me, she's like, when was the last time you asked so-and-so how they're doing? And it makes a big difference, because your
Yeah.
employees, your clients, they make or break your business.
Yep.
And so treating people like humans and not like your next transaction seems to be helpful.
Imagine that, right?
Yeah.
Actually, real relationships, building our, setting up our course through life.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. What advice would you have then for people that are just getting started in their own business? Like how to manage stress on a regular basis? Like do you have outlets? Do you have go-tos? Do you have things where do you take breaks? Do you set limits on when you're working? Because it can be 24/7, right? I mean,
It's on my mind 24/7.
Right,
That's
right.
for sure.
So how do you set the limits? Now that you have a child too, that's going to be different, right? I
Mhm.
mean, are you going to be texting someone when he's 5 and wants your attention, that sort of
Yeah.
thing?
I'm still working on it. What I would say my advice would be is a lot of things. I think doing something, to set those limits apart. I go to the gym in the morning,
Okay.
work out, helps me kind of get some clarity. But also just knowing that it's going to be there when you go back to it in 2 hours,
Right.
because I get really limited time with my son. I'm going to be completely honest. I wake up, I've got a couple hours, and then I go to the gym and I go and I start working.
Right.
I go to the office, I work, and then I get home and he goes to bed at 7. Right. So if
Right.
I work till 5, and usually it creeps over to 5:30 to 6, because there's always one more thing I can be doing.
Right.
But I never regret leaving at 4:30 or 5 and spending time with my son, and then maybe doing something after.
Yeah.
Or spending time with my wife, and then maybe just picking it up again in the morning. And I think my advice would be just always have your priorities set, because there's a lot of things you can lose pretty easily. And I think for me, my family is the whole reason I started this. So keeping that perspective of, did I build this to be a business owner? Did I
Right.
build this to create a life that I can be what my dad was to me? And so that's what I would say is try to keep that perspective and at least have a wife or spouse that can slap you back into that perspective when you need to, right? Because I'm not perfect at it. But she's, I talk about her a lot, but she's amazing. She really is. So
that's good.
She helps me with that.
The business is a means to an end, is what you're saying, and to not forget that. Don't forget what the end is, right? Because sometimes we get confused about what the end is, and we think that the goal is to have the successful business, but that's not the goal. At least that's not your goal. Your goal, and I think for most entrepreneurs, that's not their goal. Their goal is, financial security or whatever, so they can take care of their family or take care of some other circumstance. And so as long as you keep that as your main goal, then I think that does inform what you do. And like you said, it's always going to be there tomorrow. And it's totally true. I run my own business as well, and I get caught in the same thing. And I think, I could keep doing this. And I'm thinking, you know what? I can do this tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I can take this time with my wife. Our kids are all grown now, but it's great to just spend time with her too. So
yeah. And it's that same thing with, maybe I'm being repetitive here, but treating people as people.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then it makes it so I don't go home and I'm not exhausted. I'm not just like broken down by the end of the day. I'm telling my wife of, hey, I just had this awesome conversation with this guy. I don't think he's going to work with us, but he is such a cool guy. Or this client just reached out to us and we just made some introductions or whatever it is. We didn't make any extra money, but it's just awesome. It's fun to talk to people and get to know them. And then it kind of gets you in this positive cycle of, how am I going to treat my son? How am I going to treat my wife? What am I going to do? And so at the end of the day, kind of having those priorities of, are you going to treat people like people? Are you going to really help people around you? I'm not perfect at it. I probably sound like a narcissist on this right now, but I think it's a great
you don't,
mindset.
and I'm a psychologist, so you don't have to worry about that.
Perfect. But I think it's just fun to keep in mind and makes your life a lot better.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for coming in today.
Yeah.
Revive Executive Branding, where can they go? Is that the URL?
reviveexecutivebranding.com.
Perfect. Yeah. So if you want to learn more about that, please go there. And again, thank you for sharing and great wisdom, great advice for people.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. We invite you back to other podcasts where together we can increase our mental health momentum.